Breaking today, royal fury as Prince Harry and Meghan Markle disgustingly hijacked the centenary celebrations of the late Queen Elizabeth II.
People around the Queen thought Meghan was, by the end, showing narcissistic tendencies.
The centenary of Queen Elizabeth lit up the spotlight in a way nobody could ignore. Two very different scenes played out at the exact same time, right in front of everyone. And the contrast was loud without anyone even needing to point it out. At Buckingham Palace, the working royals stood together to honor the moment, with Catherine sharing a deeply emotional exchange with 88-year-old George Cross recipient Tony Gladhill. He was there because his late wife had one final wish that he show up, and that moment hit people hard. Meanwhile, across the same timeline, Meghan's operation was moving in a totally different lane. Influencer gift boxes were being sent out right on cue, carefully timed with the centenary buzz. Inside, there were candles described with references to the children's royal titles, plus handwritten calligraphy notes painting soft scenes of afternoons picking flowers with Lilibet and cozy nights snuggling with Archie and Harry. It was polished, personal, and clearly meant to grab attention. At the same time, Harry was making his own quiet headline, briefing Town and Country magazine that he had sent flowers to the Queen's gravesite. That single move said a lot. It showed how he blends public gestures with private meaning, choosing a media outlet that has often been seen as sympathetic to his side, especially after Omid Scobie's coverage stirred conversation. There was reduced visibility around the claim that he had sent flowers to Queen Elizabeth II's burial site at Windsor, but it didn't stay quiet for long. Town and Country picked up the story and reported it, pointing out that this wasn't even the first time he had flowers sent. They also mentioned that on the one-year anniversary of her death in 2023, he had visited St. George's Chapel privately. That word stood out, but what happened next made it feel questionable. The article leaned on the idea of privacy, yet right after, a press-style update was given to a national magazine describing that same private gesture. That switch-up raised eyebrows fast. A moment that was framed as personal suddenly became something shared with the public, and the contradiction was hard to ignore. Sending flowers to a grave is usually something deeply personal, something done out of real care and respect. It carries meaning because it's quiet and sincere. But the second that action gets passed along to a journalist with details attached, it starts to feel different. What could have stayed a simple act of remembrance suddenly looks more like a calculated media move, and that shift changes how people see it completely. The credit is the real focus here. The flowers are just the tool to get that recognition. This isn't some small note about manners or etiquette. It points to something much bigger and harder to ignore. It opens a clear window into how Harry's connection to Queen Elizabeth II's memory has played out in public view. There were reports of tense phone calls about security and family issues, moments that painted a strained picture during her later years. He also didn't attend certain visits when she wasn't well, including close to the end of her life, which people noticed and talked about. On top of that, he was involved in a Netflix documentary where the Commonwealth, so closely tied to her legacy, was examined in a critical way for a global audience. Then came his memoir, which shared personal accounts of family dynamics, adding even more layers to the story. And after all of that, the gesture of sending flowers to her grave during the centenary, followed by sharing it publicly, made the whole situation feel even more loaded and complicated in the eyes of many observers. Robert Hardman's carefully framed contribution to the centenary coverage hit differently. It gave one of the strongest, most institution-backed signals yet of what people have been quietly saying about the couple for years.
Told me it gives me PTSD. It's classic Meghan, literally a workplace psychopath, smiling to the public on one side of her face and glowering at you on the secret side. The woman treats anyone she has power over as totally disposable. You are just treated like a tradesman who is there to fix the toilet.
Hardman isn't some outsider chasing attention. He's one of the most established royal columnists in the British press, with decades of access built on trust and long-standing relationships. His position means he speaks in a tone that doesn't risk that access, which makes every word carry extra weight. Writing for the Daily Mail, his style is measured and controlled, shaped to respect the system he reports on. So when Hartman says that individuals close to the Queen believed she had noticed certain difficult personality traits in Meghan, it lands differently. This isn't wild guessing or dramatic spin, it's him relaying what he was told by those within that inner circle in a way that shows he understands just how sensitive that kind of information is. What really stands out is how he explains the Queen's early approach. He paints a picture of her being thoughtful and genuinely generous, putting real effort into figuring out which patronages would suit Meghan best. There was careful consideration about what roles would feel meaningful, what platforms would give her purpose, and how she could settle into a position that worked long term. Those choices weren't random, they were selected with intention and care, which makes everything that followed feel even more layered. The Queen really took her time thinking it through, weighing every detail carefully. She considered which patronages would actually matter, which ones would suit Meghan, and how they could reflect her own long-standing values and interests. At first, the couple seemed on board with those choices, but then, as Hardman puts it, they were basically torn up, and that shift didn't go unnoticed. The mood around it changed fast, from confusion to frustration, and eventually to a feeling among those close to the Queen that she had been let down. There were also claims from people in her circle pointing to concerns about certain personality traits, particularly in Meghan's conduct, and those concerns kept coming up in different accounts. This version of events lines up with what several commentators and royal observers have been saying over time, all pointing toward a similar pattern in how things played out behind the scenes. Other voices added to that picture too. Hugo Vickers spoke about underlying worries, while Lady Colin Campbell and reports referenced by Rebecca English described moments where extra precautions were taken during interactions. There were even claims that certain meetings weren't held one-on-one, and that the Queen preferred having others present, especially later on. Reports also suggested that phone calls about security and family issues could become intense, sometimes leaving her unsettled, which is why support from others was said to be necessary during those conversations. When you line up all these accounts from different sources over the years, they paint a consistent and complicated picture. According to those perspectives, the dynamic between Harry and the Queen in her later years didn't reflect the close, easy bond many people once assumed. It looked far more strained and difficult than that. What this describes is a relationship shaped by ongoing grievances and firm demands, directed at someone who was elderly, unwell, and not in a position to respond with the full weight of the institution behind her. That imbalance added a serious layer of tension to everything that was happening at the time. Then there's the so-called Sussex Survivors Club narrative that came up through Tom Sykes' reporting on the death stare footage, bringing in a workplace angle that people found hard to ignore. Former staff members who had worked with Harry and Meghan reportedly used that label to describe their shared experience, and some went on record saying that the footage of Meghan giving a sharp look toward her chief of staff left a lasting impression on them. One former staffer even used a very strong phrase, describing her as a workplace psychopath, claiming there was a split between how she appeared publicly and how she acted behind the scenes. That's not a light claim. It's the kind of language tied to behavioral discussions in professional environments, often used to describe someone who can switch from polished and charming in public to much harsher in private settings. The idea being pushed in these accounts is that charm can be used strategically for public image, while interactions with colleagues behind closed doors might feel very different. These are serious claims, and they've played a big role in shaping how some people interpret those behind-the-scenes dynamics. At the center of this is the idea of power dynamics, who holds control and who feels like they can't push back. The claims describe a pattern where authority is used in a way that makes it difficult for others to challenge decisions, and that theme keeps popping up across different parts of the Sussex operation. People often point to staff turnover as one example, with reports noting a drop from a larger team down to a much smaller group over time. Then there are accounts from former employees who spoke to Tom Bower for the Betrayal biography, sharing difficult workplace experiences, only to later see those claims dismissed by the couple as part of a coordinated media narrative. That back and forth has kept the controversy alive and messy. Other moments added even more layers. Gavin Burrow's decision to step back from his own witness statement during legal proceedings raised questions about the pressure tied to being involved at that level. Then there's the Shola Kaye related dispute, which also pointed to tensions when expectations weren't met or cooperation didn't go smoothly. Each situation seems different on the surface, but the underlying theme people highlight stays the same. In these accounts, individuals who report negative experiences often end up being described by the couple's team as unreliable, biased, or part of a wider attempt to damage their reputation. At the same time, there's an alternative view that says these repeated claims might reflect a consistent pattern of behavior, and as more voices share similar stories, that possibility becomes harder for some observers to ignore. All of this makes the contrast even sharper when placed alongside moments like Catherine's emotional interaction with Tony Gladhill at Buckingham Palace, happening on the very same day as the flower announcement and influencer campaign. The timing alone had people talking, and the difference in tone between those moments felt impossible to miss. The centenary moment didn't need any spin, the contrast spoke for itself, loud and clear. On one side, there's a formal royal event, and in the middle of it, a recently widowed eight-year-old man. Catherine notices him, walks over, and actually connects. She speaks gently, tells him to stay in touch, and even admits to others nearby that she finds big events tough because of her soft voice and how she's always being told to speak louder. That detail matters because it doesn't feel staged. She's not putting on a show of empathy, she's right there in it, dealing with the same awkwardness and sharing it openly with the people around her. The camera catches something real, her hand resting on Tony Gladhill's hands, her full attention on him, the kind of warmth you can't fake even if you tried. This is what people mean when they talk about the institution actually working the way it's supposed to. Not polished photo ops, not carefully managed images, not curated letters written in calligraphy or influencer packages timed to hit the same news cycle, and not quiet media briefings trying to shape the narrative. Just a woman with a soft voice at a formal event, finding an elderly widower who showed up because of his late wife's wish, and making that moment feel personal and genuine. When you place that side by side with everything else happening that same day, the difference hits hard, and people noticed it instantly. The Sussex Operation candle boxes, the flowers press release, even the use of royal titles in product descriptions ended up creating a comparison the day didn't need help making. On one side, the institution was honoring its central figure with tradition and ceremony. On the other, there were commercial-style moves that used familiar names and imagery tied to that same legacy, all unfolding at the exact same time and right in public view. Robert Hartman's reporting comes into this with a tone that's careful but hard to misread. He doesn't overstate things, but the message still lands clearly. What he presents lines up with a growing collection of accounts that have been building over time, all pointing in a similar direction about how events were experienced behind the scenes. According to those perspectives, people close to the Queen felt deeply disappointed by how things evolved. They had seen the relationship shift from an initially warm and welcoming start to something far more strained, marked by difficult conversations, missed moments, and public projects that stirred debate. There were also claims about concerning behavioral patterns being noticed, especially regarding Meghan, which added to that sense of concern. Taken together, these accounts suggest that the trust once placed in the couple was seen by some as seriously damaged. It's a strong conclusion, and one that continues to shape how this whole situation is viewed. She saw it, at least that's what many of these accounts suggest, and her final years carried the weight of that realization. This was someone who had welcomed them in, offered support, and gave what she could within her role, only to later face a situation that became increasingly public, complicated, and hard to manage. The contrast between those early efforts and what followed is what people keep coming back to. The flowers sent to her grave during the centenary can be read as a meaningful gesture, one that acknowledges the scale of her legacy and what she represented. But the decision to have that gesture shared publicly on the same day added another layer to how it was received. For some, that mix of private sentiment and public messaging made the moment feel divided between sincerity and visibility. Even broader than that, the centenary seemed to highlight bigger questions about direction and alignment within the royal structure itself. People began asking where King Charles stands, whether his actions lean more towards supporting the institutional path represented by William, or whether personal ties to his younger son influenced those decisions in a different way. That tension has become a major talking point. At the same time, the contrast in presence was clear. The working royals were visible at Buckingham Palace, representing continuity and duty, while official listings still include Harry and Meghan, with no announced plans to change titles or positions in the line of succession. That split between formal roles and ongoing connections keeps the situation complex and very much unresolved in the public eye. On the day of the centenary, those candle descriptions using the children's royal titles were out there, and the Flowers press update went straight to Town and Country, and still, there was no visible response from the institution. That silence didn't go unnoticed, and for many watching, it became part of the story itself. Tina Brown's take stands out because she's usually seen as supportive of the monarchy, not someone quick to criticize it. So when she says she's been loyal to King Charles but now believes he may be making a serious mistake, it hits differently. When someone who typically backs the system starts raising concerns, people pay closer attention. Her framing goes even further, suggesting that Harry and Meghan are now operating at full speed, testing limits to see how far they can go, especially when there are no clear consequences pushing back. The idea is simple, but powerful behavior tends to shift based on what happens after actions are taken. If actions lead to consequences, people adjust. If actions bring no response, that sends a message too. And in this case, critics argue that repeated situations like the reported commercial-style use of royal titles, despite prior agreements, haven't triggered any visible institutional reaction. That absence can shape future decisions just as much as any formal rule. It's not complicated, but it is impactful. When there's no pushback, the boundaries don't just stay where they are, they start to stretch. And that's exactly what observers believe is happening here. Harry and Meghan aren't moving in the shadows, what they're doing is right out in the open. The candle descriptions reportedly use the children's royal titles directly in product-style messaging shared with major outlets. The Sussex.com domain stays active and even connects back to official channels, and the Australian tour followed a familiar royal-style playbook without much visible separation. None of this felt hidden, it looked intentional and carefully timed. The key point people keep circling back to is this: the strategy only works if there's no pushback. Palace briefings have made it clear that awareness isn't the issue, which means the lack of response is being read as a deliberate choice. Not a mistake, not something missed, an actual decision to let things play out rather than step in. Why that choice is being made is where opinions split. Some say it's about family loyalty, others think it's long-term strategy, and some believe it's about avoiding even more public fallout. But no matter the reason, the result looks the same from the outside, no visible consequences. And because of that, the behavior doesn't slow down, it builds. Over time, that pattern seems to escalate, leading right up to major moments like the centenary of Queen Elizabeth II, where everything from the candle narratives to the flower story lands all at once. It feels less like a one-off and more like the result of a path that's been allowed to keep going without interruption for years. And it doesn't stop there. The discussion spills into other controversies tied to that same period, including references to a MasterChef Australia appearance and tensions involving the Irwin family well-known figures in wildlife conservation. Those moments add even more layers, extending the conversation beyond the centenary and keeping the spotlight firmly in place. There were reports that the response to that situation sparked yet another round of public tension, the kind of celebrity clash that keeps attention locked in when a brand needs it most. Whether that conflict was carefully managed or just unfolded naturally almost doesn't matter. The bigger takeaway is what it says about how the whole operation runs. The argument some observers make is blunt. When attention drops, new moments are created to pull it right back. That's where the idea of controversy as a tool comes in, especially in an environment where visibility equals value. It's not subtle, and it doesn't try to be. Then there's the Sussex.com update, which people quickly picked apart after the Australian tour. Instead of pushing that content through Archewell, the foundation set up to represent their independent charitable work. The updates reportedly went straight onto Sussex.com. That detail might seem small, but it carries weight. Sussex is the title, and Sussex.com is tied directly to that identity. Archewell, on the other hand, was meant to stand apart, to give their projects a separate space not linked to royal branding. So choosing one over the other sends a signal, and observers noticed it instantly. Critics argue that this leans into the commercial side of the title in a way that had previously been restricted under agreements like Sandringham. What adds another layer is that the royal family's official website still links to the couple under those Sussex titles, which makes the whole setup feel inconsistent to some watching closely. That link sitting there in plain sight has become one of the most talked about details in this entire situation, because it highlights the gap between what was expected and what's actually happening. The website isn't just a random page, it's a carefully managed institutional tool that shows who is connected to the crown and what roles they play. Harry and Meghan are still listed there, and those listings include links to Sussex.com, which has been updated with tour style and promotional content. That connection creates a strong impression, because if the official site links to it, people naturally read that as a form of association, even approval. That's where the tension really kicks in. The listing suggests an ongoing tie to the institution, while the content it connects to can look more commercial in nature. And despite all the talk around it, the palace line has stayed the same, no plans to change anything. That silence has become part of the message, whether intended or not. William's stance isn't something you'll hear directly from him. He keeps a strict wall of silence when it comes to his brother, a strategy many royal watchers say is deliberate and calculated. The idea is simple. Anything said privately could quickly become public, so nothing gets said at all. Even without direct quotes, his position has been pieced together through reporting from figures like Charlotte Griffith and others with insight into his circle, along with the pattern of decisions coming from his camp. His approach has been clear through actions, keeping communications tightly controlled, maintaining distance, avoiding public alignment, and steering clear of events linked to those controversies. From that, observers draw a sharp contrast. One side is seen as favoring stricter enforcement, removing titles, updating official listings, and sticking firmly to prior agreements. The other side appears more willing to absorb the situation and move forward without direct confrontation. That gap between approaches stands out, and moments like the centenary only make it more obvious. You've got one future king focused on shaping a long-term institutional path, while watching situations like the candle releases and flower announcements unfold in real time. That contrast isn't subtle, and it's exactly why the conversation keeps growing louder. A press release goes out on the exact day of his grandmother's centenary, and people start connecting dots about what that might mean for the future when real authority is in his hands. At the same time, you've got a sitting king dealing with serious health challenges, even pausing cancer treatment for a state visit, while choosing to absorb everything happening around him without any direct response. That silence speaks loudly. According to accounts highlighted by Hardman's sources, the Queen was aware of the situation as it unfolded. There were claims she noticed difficult personality traits, that certain phone calls left her distressed, and that others were sometimes present during interactions to help manage the pressure. Back in January 2020, she attempted to set clear boundaries, drawing a line meant to prevent exactly this kind of situation. But that line didn't hold. And what followed is now locked into the public record. On one side, working royals stood at Buckingham Palace, honoring her life and legacy in a formal, traditional setting. On the other, influencer gift boxes were being delivered, with product descriptions referencing her nickname, while a press update about flowers sent to her grave was published the very same day. Two completely different approaches, unfolding side by side, impossible to ignore. That contrast is what defines the moment. Not opinions, not spin, just the documented reality of what happened, preserved across coverage, images, and timelines. Catherine's quiet, human interaction with Tony Gladhill exists in that same record, captured on the same day as the product drops in media briefings. It's all there, permanently. And that's what people keep coming back to, the split between those two spaces, the palace courtyard and the influencer box. One rooted in tradition, the other in modern attention dynamics, both shaping the story of that day in very different ways. If you've made it this far, drop your thoughts below. This one really gets people talking. Make sure to like, subscribe, and share if you want more breakdowns like this, and jump into the comments because the conversation around this isn't slowing down anytime soon.